screen time with families. So first of all, almost every child in the United States uses regularly some sort of internet connection services. Some of them are through smartphones or tablets. Some of them are through school-given tablets. Some of them are through internet services in their home. But you can see that really it's not just teenagers as well. So most people don't really have any problem or thought about the idea that many teens walk around now with smartphones. But in the most recent research that has been done in this area, 37% of 3 to 4-year-olds report regular use of a parent's smartphone or tablet. And that's probably pretty young, 87% of 5 to 7-year-olds. So kids, even very young children, are really have immediate access to the internet and social media. And for the most part, a lot of parents don't really supervise that use because we have actually really good parent controls and things like that for the internet, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But what's most important, and the reason we're talking about this here and now, is that most teenagers report or believe that their parents really don't know about the websites that they visit. And that could be true or not. You can drop some information about that in the comments if you want to share. So some parents may actually know quite a bit more than their kids know, but their expectation is their parents really don't know about their internet usage. And in 2016, almost a quarter of all teenagers described themselves as constantly connected to the internet, really indicating that they felt like at all times they were accessing the internet or accessing social media. When we use the language of screen time, we're really talking about any time that a person spends in front of a screen. It can be a smartphone, a tablet, a computer, a television. So any time that you are face in front of some sort of device. And it doesn't just necessarily mean you're on social media. It could be playing video games, it could be video chatting, it could be watching content. It could be nowadays accessing and doing homework. Not that we didn't always have some, obviously, access to that, but currently that's all they have access to. So when you hear screen time, when we're talking about that moving forward, think all screen time. It's also important to note, and I will talk about the differences, but not all time spent in front of a screen is necessarily a bad thing. So we have some really interesting research about adolescent brain cognitive development from the National Institute of Mental Health, or NIMH, that studied a lot of children, so close to like 11,000 9 and 10-year-olds across the country, so a lot of kids. And really what we found is that children who report using some sort of device more than 7 hours a day do have brain differences. So their MRI scans, their brains are different than children who don't use it 7 hours a day. And hopefully all of us are going, wow, 7 hours, like that's a long time. But I bet if you stopped for a minute and looked at it and watched it, I probably spend 7 hours a day in front of a screen. And a lot of kids probably spend 7 hours a day in front of a screen. So we'll talk some about what to do about this, but the kind of takeaway message here is that the amount of time that a developing brain spends in front of a screen is really important. And I will give you the guidelines about kind of how much time that really should be as we go forward. But the saving grace is that it's not all bad, because obviously we can't get rid of screens. They're really important to our society currently. As kids get older, there we go. They do begin to sort of get into some of the benefits of screen time. And what I would say is, first and foremost, about 95% of schools in the United States talk about being connected to the internet. So almost all of your kids are going to be spending time on the internet in the school setting. And educational program is really actually quite important for access, in particular through apps and through television programming like Sesame Street, that sort of stuff. And there's probably things now that are not Sesame Street and I don't know about them. But those sorts of things are actually really important educational programming for young children who might not have access otherwise. So if you've got a very busy family and the child just by nature has to spend a lot of time kind of on their own, that programming can be very, very beneficial for them. It's creative for a lot of kids. They interact in podcasts and blogs and vlogs. They create social connections that for us that are a little bit older is a little hard to understand, that the social connections young people make across the internet to them are as meaningful as our face-to-face connections with people, and are no less socially appropriate. I mean, we have to do a lot of monitoring and teach them good stewardship of obviously being online, but those social interactions and those social connections are really important for young people. In particular, people who are socially isolated. So we live in Kansas, where there are lots of places that are really isolated. There are areas of our country that are very isolated. There are young people who deal with abuse, who can't maybe are removed from school quite frequently. There are people who are developmentally different, like Asperger's or autism. There are people who are just personally kind of quirky, or socially they don't really love being face-to-face with people. And benefits of screen time for those individuals is actual social connection. That's where they get all of their social connection. The flip side to that is obviously that there are disadvantages. There really, unfortunately, are not really strict, hard and fast rules about time fit in front of a screen. Because as an example, you'll see on here that the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends for a 0 to 2 year old, no screen time. For a 2 to 5 year old, no more than an hour per day. Think about the timing of a movie. Almost all 2 to 5 year olds watch movies, and it's perfectly acceptable for us to watch movies with our young children. That's 2 hours. So automatically we're going beyond what they're recommending. So these are important things to note and to pay attention to, but they can't really be used as a hard and fast rule. What we can say about it, though, is that we should pay attention to the types of things that young people are engaged in or watching, and that we're using high quality media. We're using with very young children, outside of fun movie watching, things that are educationally appropriate for them. And note if they start to develop symptoms. So you'll see that some children who watch a lot of screen time will have headaches, poor sleep patterns, they'll have difficulty with social interactions, they may be a little bit more moody than an average child of their age. So we watch for stuff like that, and then we look to see if they're spending a lot of time on a screen, and then we might start to pull back a little bit. For teenagers, up to 6 hours a day is relatively normal in terms of what they tell us about how much time they spend on a screen. That's what's normal. Well-being peaks at around 4 hours. So if a teenager is on for about 4 hours, they're gonna be able to maintain that and manage okay. Once they start to go over that, we may start to see some detrimental effects for them. But I think it's most important really to be thinking about your young children. TV and screens for very young children does have an impact on their developing brain. So I'm not saying don't let them be on screens. I'm saying think that in the first 3 years of your toddler's life, 80% of their brain development will occur. And if they spend all of their time in front of screens, that's going to be impacted. So we just want to pay attention to that.
Hey, Abby, we just got a quick question here.
Yeah.
Is that 6 hours outside of the school environment?
The study was done prior to the school or prior to COVID. It did include the fact that you might be on a screen in school. But it was done prior to COVID, so this has really messed up the statistics. So I'm gonna guess that if before COVID, the average teenager spent 6 hours on a screen, now they might spend more like 9, because they're gonna add a couple of hours for school.
Great. Thank you. Hopefully that answered the question. Yep, sure did. Thank you.
Good. Okay. And I will talk about what to do with this. So I'll get there, I promise. So let's see. Yeah. Alrighty. So in terms of social media is beyond obviously game playing or things like TV watching. Social media is social interaction on some sort of platform. What's interesting or unique or neat about social media for young people is that it is really an environment in which you can create and share content, and you can create and develop social networks. There are probably 1,000 examples of social media websites. I put some of your most currently notable used ones by teenagers on the left-hand column over here. And I'd be really curious if there's anything on there that you're like, I've never even heard of that. I don't know what that is. These are very likely to be sites that if you have a teenager, they are active on. And we don't have a ton of time today to go into the pitfalls and the dangers of that, but it's always important to know these things like terms over here. You can find a really decent list of those on the internet so that when you see acronyms that your child is using, you'll know what those things mean. Research has also told us that young people currently, in the current generation, they really don't use Facebook. Facebook is us. We have taken Facebook. They're on Snapchat, TikTok, and Instagram. That's where you're going to find most teenagers. And I'll talk about some of the things to watch out for related to that. So benefits in terms of social media usage. So first and foremost, I've already mentioned that this is the social connection for lots of young people, particularly those who don't have access to people. In our current world, they cannot see their friends. So social media usage right now is actually relatively important for children in the social age range. Middle schoolers and high schoolers, they need social interaction, and this is one of the few ways they can get it in the current world. And so maybe we're more lenient than we would have been prior to current sort of trends. Additionally, social media usage for middle schoolers and high schoolers is really a creative outlet. It can be a community for children who feel unsafe or a lack of social support in their current environment. So if there's anything viewed as different about them and they don't find social support in their face-to-face world, social media can sometimes provide that for them, help them develop their identities and feel safe in that environment. In terms of what that looks like, from 2009 forward to 2015, kids and teens go out less. And so on the surface, we might think that might be a negative, but what that has resulted in is fewer, in terms of research, less incidences of underage drinking, illicit drug use, and car accidents amongst teens. So they are spending more time on a tablet or whatever and less time socially doing these things with their friends that we might expect them to be doing. Teens who have unique or different interests have much fewer feelings of isolation or loneliness if they have an online community that shares those interests with them. And lots of kids and teens, and this is where I think as parents, there's a significant disconnect. A lot of kids and teens see social media as a potential career opportunity in their future. Maybe not your kids and maybe not kids that you're familiar with, but it becomes motivation and work ethic for some of the ones who create content in particular. They can feel confident in that. It can foster self-esteem. I'm not saying that they will actually have a career, but I'm saying you may see a teenager who is highly motivated and creating content multiple times per day, when if they weren't doing that, they might be sitting on the couch with, watching TV. So I'm not saying that it's ideal, but I am saying it can be a motivation increaser. It can work on self-esteem. And oddly enough, 1 in a billion probably do create some sort of content that turns into a career. So some of you will be familiar with a YouTube child named Ryan who year before last made $11 million unboxing things and posting it on Facebook, or not Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. That's wild. So kids are growing up in that world, so they are not weird in their thinking of this as a potential career. We just need obviously to broaden their horizons. On the flip side, there are obviously risks of social media use. It absolutely creates a new and different and unique avenue for bullying. Kids cannot escape social media, and they have a very hard time blocking people due to that term I mentioned a little bit ago, or I didn't mention it, but it was in the list, FOMO. So kids really have difficulty in missing out on social media. So it's an avenue for bullying that they have trouble cutting off. There's obviously the potential of exploitation of young children in social media use, which is why we're doing this class, is so that you can talk to your kids about it, because they need to know about things like location tagging. If they location tag their photo and they're in the mall, it literally gives somebody the GPS location of where they presently are, and we need to teach them that stuff. And I will obviously come back to that shortly. One additional risk I just want to kind of slide in really quick when it comes to social media use is a lot of young people will do this at night before they go to bed. And this is having a pretty significant impact on sleep disruption for young people because of blue screens. And so you may not be aware of this, but everything that we watch in our life, our TVs, our phones, our computers, they are blue screens, and they emit a particular wavelength of light that triggers your brain to think it should be awake. And so it releases wake up hormones in your body. So most people, if they can at all possibly do it, should cut off anything that's electronic, with the exception of something like a Kindle Paperwhite, about 30 minutes before sleep, so that their brain will start producing the go to sleep hormone. That's, I know, a hard sell for a lot of people, myself included, and probably you, but you will sleep better if you do that. And that's good information for young kids to know, because a lot of them are laying in bed at night trying to go to sleep, flipping through their social media. So if kids find themselves caught up in social media that is on the negative side, there are detrimental effects in the sense of decreased self-esteem, unhelpful coping or avoidance. So people can give them unhelpful, bad for you coping skills. They can have difficulty with a wide variety of things like worthlessness and isolation. So what makes it beneficial is also what potentially makes it negative for children. So what do we do about that, and how do we sort it out? Is we talk to them about media. We talk to them about sleep hygiene, which is that example I just gave you of blue lights, and letting them know about things like do not disturb on your phone, allowing them to charge out of reach of the bed. Everybody charges their phone maybe in the living room while you're sleeping. Setting things like that for your family. Talking to them about texting while they're driving, texting while they're walking. People don't think about it, but I can't tell you the number of teenagers who have told me about how they hurt themselves walking and texting because they fell or ran into something. It's important to also approach and talk to particularly teenagers about ideal versus real social media. Now, we fall victim to that ourselves when we're doing things like Facebook. You see somebody who looks like they're always on vacation and their house is clean and they look like they've done their makeup every day this week. That is not real. We know that's not real, and yet we still compare ourselves to that. So teenagers are even more prone to do that than we are as adults. And so there need to be real conversations about how social media is not what people really look like. They are putting their best foot forward. It's like they got ready and dressed up on Sunday to go to church. You don't look like that every day of the week. It's the same sort of example, and that's a really important piece of information that they need to take to heart. The other part, and I'm going to talk here about media literacy and digital citizenship, so I'm going to leave that for now. What's important to note is that no matter how much you talk to your teenager about these sort of things, they can be very aware of the risks. And part of the developmental nature of teenagers is to feel immune to things that are risky. So if you think back to your own youth and your own childhood, you can think of some of the things that you did. You're like, that was really dumb. I could have really hurt myself. Your teenagers have that same mentality because that's a normal part of development. So we have to stay on top of this stuff, even though they may be very bright and perfectly understand the risks. It's important that we continue to help them make good decisions about that. And in particular, when it comes to the ideal versus the real on social media, really driving home the point that people are not who they say they are always on social media, because things are live, and they don't understand that sometimes live is not live, even though it might look live. So we're really wanting to work with them on the understanding that you must really be, this is part of media literacy and digital citizenship, on top of knowing that not everybody you are talking to might be the real person that you're talking to. and that's really important. So the internet challenges is something we will sometimes talk about here, because sometimes these are innocuous and they're no big deal, like the bottle flip challenge. Sometimes they're things that are really quite hurtful to them, like the snorting of, or not snorting, but trying to eat a spoonful of cinnamon. That can hurt you. So these are things to pay attention to and to educate them about. And if you know about them, I can bet you that your young child or your teenager knows about them. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because we don't have very much time on this today. Oh, there we go. All right, so let's talk just a minute about cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is exactly like regular bullying. It just happens to take place on the internet or in media. What's most important, I think, about the concept of cyberbullying is that young people will not avoid it. They will maintain and stay in maybe an Instagram group or a texting group that is bullying them due to that fear of not being aware of everything that's going on. So it's nonstop. It can be anonymous. It can be spread very, very easily. And it's really, really important to talk to young people about cyberbullying, support them in how to reach out for help, supporting them in blocking people because they might need some hand holding in blocking an individual, and really blocking them across the board, not just blocking them on one site, but leaving them open in other apps. It's got to be across the board. What I will say is don't take away their device. We've already sort of covered a little bit about why their device is very important to them, but they're going to feel punished for something that they didn't do. It's more important that they make good decisions around their device, because devices are not going anywhere. They're always going to have a device. So we want to teach them how to handle it best rather than just taking it away, because they'll never learn how to deal with it if we just take it away. So I have mentioned several times that you really need to talk to your kids and your teens about the media. First and foremost, you can say all sorts of things, but the most important thing is that you have a complete open line of communication about social media with your kids. It might feel like a weird thing to do, but I myself have researched pretty much every kid app that you can think of. I have an account on all of them because I want to know what they're seeing. And I want to see what they see, and I want to be involved, not connected to them because they need their privacy. But I want to know what could happen to them, and I want to be aware of those interactions that they might be having. So just have a very open line of communication about media, know what it is they're involved in, and understand that telling them, no, you can't use that is not necessarily going to mitigate the risk for them, because some places you might let them use, you might think Facebook is safe, could have just as much risk as some of the other ones. For us, this is the fun one, we need to model good social media use around young kids. So we have expectations and we have rules in our family, and we follow them as well. So if I say no device dinner, I don't bring my device to dinner. I don't just say you can't, nobody does. Set your parental controls. If you don't know how to do that, Google how to set parental controls in whatever particular app or website or computer or TV you are using. You can set and purchase apps that set things like digital bedtimes, which basically cuts off your phone at a particular time. Your child can request through the app approval for more time from you, but you have really good monitoring of it. It's kind of like how your cell phones can go on a do not disturb mode while you're in the car, and so nothing comes through while you're in a car. There are apps for that in a parental control world on smart devices. They do not take the place of you being available to have conversations and personally monitoring them, but they are very helpful for busy families, and particularly for those of us who maybe don't know exactly how to do things. This kind of takes care of it for you. In terms of app safety, you'll have access to this, I assume, but if you want to take a quick picture of your screen or whatever it is you're looking on, these are some of the app safety apps that are out there that give you parental control over your child's devices. These are self-control apps that are in the same purview, but it's actually the child monitors them and helps them do some of those sorts of things, like turning off your phone while you're in the car. And then lastly, I don't think that most people really actually create, a family media plan, but it is important to think as a family that we have regular tech-free times as a family, particularly now in this current COVID world, where our young kids have to spend a wide amount of time on a tech device just to do their daily lives. And we probably are too if we're working from home. You may be sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours during your day. So it is important as a family to set up some sort of routine, some sort of zone or room or time that nobody's on tech and people reconnect from a face-to-face perspective. You can designate tech-free outings. You can say on Saturday we spend 2 hours walking around our neighborhood and we'll take a phone. That might be hard. Probably a lot of you just went, don't take a phone. What if something happens? So maybe you take a phone, but it stays in your back pocket. Because I had the same thought when I said it, like, oh, I'm going to take my phone. But most of this screen, I think, has been covered while I've been talking. Watch programs with your kids. Read up on the new apps and the games that your kids are playing. Know that there are distinct differences in games, like Fortnite versus Pokemon Go. So they may feel the same in the sense that your child could play it for 18 hours in a row, but there is such a thing as ethical game development, particularly when marketed towards children. So something like Pokemon Go actually creates healthy activity in your child because they have to actually move about their environment, whereas something like Fortnite's quite violent. Gamers are allowed to kill each other, things like that. So know what your kids are playing. And on the don't side, it's really, really important to not shame a mistake from a media perspective. Your kids will make mistakes when it comes to social media because this is their world that they make mistakes in. Just like we made mistakes in the physical world, they are going to make mistakes in social media. Use those as teachable moments just like your parents did with you, and we will do with our kids. Cutting screen time before bed can make a huge difference in a child who's not sleeping well. So I think that's a really important one to remember as well. And do your best not to spy. Teenagers' social media is very similar to a teenager's room, and we don't necessarily, go through their room unless we have reasons to do that. So just remember that social media to them is a privacy issue, just as something like their room might be. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing, and there's a little resource list so you can see where things came from. But I'm going to stop sharing so that we can all come back to or maybe I'll leave that on there for a moment. But now we have some time for questions.
So we have a question about will folks be able to get the PowerPoint? Yes, most definitely. We're going to get that posted to the FSGC website, and that's fsgctopeka.com. It'll be on the right-hand side when you click on Parent Resources on that page. So please feel free to go out there and look at this. We wanted to keep this kind of shorter in length for the presentation, but know that the recording as well as the PowerPoint will be available for you.
Excellent. And you are muted in case you're going to try to say something out loud, but you can also type a question in the group chat, and it looks like Pam just put the website on the group chat as well. But you can unmute yourself if you would like to. So any additional questions that we might be able to answer for you?
Thank you. This was very helpful.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. So someone just asked a question that said, who should we report to, or what should you do if you find out your child is being cyberbullied? That's a multifaceted question. One thing that I will say is the helping them learn how to block and who to block responsibly does tend to fall on the parent. If it is any sort of exploitative nature to it, like someone is trying to sexually exploit them or anything like that, that's actually a police matter and you can report that. If it's just that some kid in their school is bullying them, you can encourage them to report the bullying just like they would in the school environment. It's really tricky for schools because it's happening outside of school hours, but they can still use that as a sort of empowering moment to report what it is that's happening to them. But for the most part, it's really on us to help them learn, I got to cut that person. I need to cut that person out of their ability to do that. Someone else just commented to take screenshots and document it. And yes, you'll see that in the PowerPoint. If it turns into something that you need to like call a parent, or it does become a legal matter, having a screenshot and documenting it would be important for that. There was another question about at what age would you recommend letting your child have a social media account? That's also a good question. I would not probably do that prior to middle school, though I see it, because I said I have accounts in a wide variety of social media kid accounts. A lot of kids have social media accounts. So rather than give you a specific age, what I would say is if you are a good monitor and your child has good digital literacy and they understand that things are not real online always, they could have an account, but I certainly wouldn't entertain that prior to middle school. Those are excellent questions. Any additional ones? Oh, and I guess I would also say it does depend to some degree on the social media account. If you're going to give them a Facebook account, and so I am friends with my best friend's kids on Facebook, and her kids are like 8 and 10 now, and they're on the kid Facebook, and they friend me, and I can talk to them, and we send each other pictures. But their parents are really the owners of the accounts. So that kind of account, go for it. But if you're going to let them like have a TikTok account or something like that that's all on their own, or an Instagram, that's a whole different matter. Yes, someone just, I forgot what it was called. It's called Kids Messenger through your Facebook account. They love that. Most little kids really enjoy that. So that, I couldn't remember what it was called. So it's Kids Messenger. And then they'll feel like that could be a good teaching tool. That lets them develop good media literacy as they're aging. I think that might be all the questions, Pam.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening, taking the time out of your evening. We hope you found this helpful. And please, if you're not already following the FSGC Facebook page, I encourage you to do that, because we have lots of helpful parenting resources, articles, information about upcoming free real-world parenting sessions. We always put it on Facebook. So hope you sign up, follow us on that. And again, thank you so much for your time. And thank you, Dr. Callis, for presenting for us this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Bye, everyone.
Have a good evening.